Hello, Rowan Mithril here once again, getting back to the Mega Man Rock Force Blind Run. So in the last video, we finished out the game pretty much, the last stage of Justice Man's Fortress of Birditude, and we saw the ending. So a few things have changed in Justice Man's final stage, so let's get right to it. For great justice! The Shockman Revisited section of the stage does bring back the background asset, so you can tell when the water's about to get zapped. Although, that being said, there's absolutely no warning that this is zappy water still. I guess I got super lucky in the blind run that it didn't go off while I was in it. One extra attack from Photon Man that I didn't actually notice. It only seems to happen if he lands right next to you, and he'll punch you, but you pretty much just have to sit there and take it like a Mega Man for it to actually go off. I've let myself take some rather hefty damage here to prove a point. This area works like it's supposed to now. No longer do you get a free life refill due to the ready reboot after every fight. Now, it works like the classic games usually do. Whatever level your life is at after you fight one of the Robot Masters, that's what it's gonna stay at. Just a little proof of concept here, if I can pull this off. For those wondering, ties do count. Naturally, it does cost you a life, but it's only fair. So I'm sure we pretty much all have this piece together by now, but here's the proper weakness loop for the game. The main point of confusion seems to be Photon Man basically having two weaknesses. Both Phantom Fuse and Charade clones seem to do equal damage to him. This is what screwed me up during the rematches, and why I didn't have any Charade clones to try against Virus Man. Although, reading the update log for the game, it seems that in some versions of the game there were glitches to where the Charade clone didn't work particularly well against Virus Man. But here's the proper loop anyway. One last bit of assistance from the Rock Force. Cutman shows up to give you a free E-Tank. Thank you very much. Nothing has really changed in the dialogue here, though it was altered so that if you have to go through the fight again, it doesn't repeat at the start. In the first phase of the Justice Man fight, he doesn't have any new attacks, but he'll telegraph what he's about to do with different poses. It makes things feel a bit more fair now. After all, in the blind run footage, you saw how easy it is for him to just suddenly decide he's going to crash into you with no warning. So now it's all about learning the different poses and how to react to them. For those wondering, he does have a weakness now to the Shock Gauntlet, fittingly enough, in both phases of the fight. But now, power-up sequence! In this phase he does have two new attacks that he can do. So we'll see if we can get him to do either of those. Okay, if he does that, keep moving. And get ready for the platform to slide under you. That can be a bit problematic at times. Oh, don't do that now. So far he hasn't done his other mid-air attack. He's just doing this a bunch now. Come on, I know you have another attack. I've seen you do it. Okay, here it is. He summons shots from the bottom and then fires them at you in a stream like that. Okay, so let's just finish you off. Shock Gauntlet! That was a bit close. And with that, the ending continues as normal. Unfortunately, nothing has really changed with the ending. A couple of little changes in the dialogue. The unfortunately typo was fixed, and also it said now that Roll was just calmed down instead of getting her to go to sleep. But other than that, the ending has remained as it is, for better or for worse. But anyway, that's pretty much all that's new with Justice Man's stage. So with that, let's get into some final thoughts. And so with that, we've reached the end of Mega Man Rock Force, and it's time to move on to final thoughts on the project as a whole. This was a rather interesting project to take part in, and fairly unique in how recording and posting went. It was interesting being in on this from the earliest versions of the game, and seeing how much it's improved since then. In fact, it's been confirmed that the game is updated even beyond the recent version I was given right before I started posting these videos. It just goes to show how active a project it is. From what I've been told, the changes from the version where I got the extra footage are, for the most part, fairly minimal. Some notable changes I've been told about: the screw bombers in Charade Man's stage are a different color now to help them be more visible to the player. Photon Man's stage has a new ladybug-type enemy in the first room, and Fish Man's room has a slide passage now that helps you dodge the bomb attacks. For those wondering, when I get to doing perfect runs of this game, I'll get the most recent version available. In fact, to the creator, if you end up updating the game further and want me to test anything in it, feel free to let me know. Okay, so onto the game itself. Like with Unlimited, I'm going to start with a negative and work toward the positive, as I like to end on a positive note. Now, a lot of the constructive criticism I planned to give back when I first recorded the blind run, I've already told Goldwater DLS about it. When I realized it was going to be a while before I could post the footage, I went ahead and gave him my feedback, and a lot of it actually has gone into consideration. Some of the things I brought up, some minor control issues, the virus effect being a bit overpowered, and the Rock Force just kind of vanishing from the storyline after you finish rescuing them. These are all things that have been addressed, so it was nice being able to help in that. So, things that I think could still use work. The first thing I'll point out, there have been a number of comments about it, some of the cutscene art. It doesn't really get in the way of the gameplay or anything for the most part, but it is something that could perhaps use some polish. It's something that has already undergone a lot of improvement. For example, comparing the televised news segments in the intro. The new version gets rid of the Street Fighter cameo, but just comparing the art style here. Look at the papers the anchor is holding. They have a nice form to them, the curl in the papers. Compare this to the old image of Ryu reading the news, where it kind of looks like he's reading a piece of bread. So it is something that is being worked on. I do think one of the biggest issues on Mega Man in these images is still proportions. Like the image of Mega Man used for the rescue cutscenes, his head looks a little bit big for the body. In other images, the forearms look a little bit oversized, perhaps. It's something where I'd suggest looking at the existing Mega Man cutscenes in games like 4, 5, 6, 9, and 10. One of the easiest ones would be looking at the title screen of Mega Man 9. There's a good image there of Mega Man full body in an action pose that can give a good show of his proportions. You might try practicing on pencil and paper first, or with a tablet if you have one, and then once you're comfortable there, apply that to the pixel art. You might also be able to get help with facial expressions by going on an image search and looking for facial emotion study and then the type of emotion you're looking for. I would also say Charade Man's stage select portrait looks a little bit off. The head looks a bit too small, both compared to the other portraits and even Charade Man's own neck in the picture. You might want to make the head a little bit bigger, and perhaps put it at an angle rather than just looking dead-on straight forward. I know it's trying to show off the question mark, but changing the perspective and having his face at an angle might help it look a bit more dynamic. It's one of those things where overall, it's just about practicing to get better, and already there are good signs of improvement there. As far as in-game artwork, there are perhaps a couple of palettes that could use a bit of tweaking. There are issues that do get a bit more in the way of the game. First, there's the battle against Charade Man. Those blue orbs on the blue background are pretty tough to track. It feels a lot less troublesome in the rematch stage, where the background for his fight is solid black. A minor tweak of some sort to the color of Charade Man's stage background would probably help. There's also the glass water tubes in Fish Man's stage. Above water, they look great, they're fine. But underwater, they blend in with the background, and in some cases, it has fatal results. It didn't just catch me in the blind run, but it caught me again when I was going back through the stage for the extra footage. Now, the major thing I have to point out, I still kind of think the storyline is the major weak point of the game. The plot it really doesn't fit the classic series. It feels like it would have worked better for, say, a Mega Man X fan game. Here in the classic series, it just feels kind of heavy-handed and forced. Now, before anyone starts thinking, oh, he just doesn't like it because he doesn't like dark, serious plotlines, bear in mind, Silent Hill is one of my favorite game series, and I wouldn't exactly call that a cheery series. I don't mind a serious, darker plot, so long as it fits the series. I'd be bothered by a Silent Hill fan game that was all sunshine and rainbows. Something I've always said about classic Mega Man, it's sort of a Saturday morning cartoon of a game. It can have a serious plot element, but by the end of the game, it should be resolved and in a positive way. Even Mega Man 7, which pretty much has the darkest ending of the official series, still resolved it in a good way. It doesn't go overly dark and OMG Surus, and still ends with Mega Man celebrating with his friends at Big Eddie's. This ending just kind of leaves it on a bad note, and it's just really not satisfying. I know there are those that will say it's a bold move to have a serious, sad ending to a classic Mega Man game, but to me, doing that stands out and not in a good way. It's the kind of thing, when you make a fan game, you really have to pay attention to the mood and feel of the source material you're working with. You also really have to pay attention to the canon of the series, and the plot here kind of ignores a lot of that. It creates a lot of inconsistencies even within the game itself. I was mainly pointing those out during the ending and the blind run footage, but to reiterate, the 8 Robot Masters of Rock Force being alive and well is proof positive that they can easily be rebuilt, which would seem to invalidate Mega Man's proclamation that he silenced their voices forever. And him saying that they would never hurt anyone, there's no real indication that they ever tried diplomatic channels before going right for the hey, let's violently take over option. Going outside the game itself, though, there's a lot of classic Mega Man canon that would seem to show that robot rights really isn't that big of an issue to where it would cause such a riot. Looking at the members of Rock Force, we have a Robot Master as recent as Nitro Man in the mix. That being said, we can largely take it to mean that this game probably takes place after Mega Man 10. In that, there are things to consider with existing Robot Masters. Gutsman is known to have a hobby of singing karaoke, something he wasn't programmed to particularly do, but no one claims he's malfunctioning, nor do they even question a robot having off-work hours to do things like hang around bars and sing karaoke. Diveman is on the team, so considering Cossack's bots, Drillman received a Medal of Honor for discovering a hot spring while digging one day. This commendation didn't go to his creator, Dr. Cossack, but to Drillman himself, showing that mankind is willing to recognize and celebrate the contributions of the robots themselves, rather than just attributing it to their creators. With Tornado Man still being around at this point, it would seem to play into what I interpreted the ending of Mega Man 9 to mean. The cutscenes showing the Robot Masters all hanging out, doing their jobs, and having fun with the main cast seemed to show that the expiration date law was quickly repealed. That seems like a pretty major victory for robot rights. And then we have Nitro Man on the team, which would probably mean that the full Mega Man 10 cast is around. So, as weird as it is to call him in as a plot point here, Sheepman, come on down! His backstory mentions that, out of personal boredom, he's changed jobs several times. His creator and bosses never said, no, you're a robot, I don't care if you're bored. This is what you were built for, now get back to work. They let him change careers at his own whim, giving him basically the same considerations and rights as any other person. With all this, the plotline just honestly doesn't seem to work. As cliché a thing as Hijacked by Wily might be, I kinda think this game would benefit from it. I do think the idea of a classic Mega Man game where Wily really isn't behind things could be an interesting idea, but it has to be done right. Here, I'm really not sure it works. Personally, what I'd suggest. The battle with Justice Man could restore his mental matrix. Shockman's attack damaged it, so Mega Man fighting with him could reinstill his sense of justice and fighting spirit within him. It's something that we've seen in the classic series before. Mega Man impressed both Duo and Ballade with his sense of justice by fighting with them. Once Justice Man snapped out of it, he could reveal that Dr. Wily's behind it all, that he planted the Robot Masters and had them incite a fake riot for robot rights as one of his takeover plots, and to further draw attention away from himself, he had Shockman ambush Justice Man and reprogram him in order to put a famous face at the head of the riots. Once this is revealed, Dr. Wily would show up, make his usual threats, and you'd get a few Skull Castle stages. Here you could maybe have more traditional Fortress-style bosses. It makes sense for Justice Man to not have big security machines at his fortress since he's not an inventor, more just a recruiter, or in the sense of this hypothetical plotline, Fishman and Polarman would just be more of Wily's robots stationed there to keep an eye on Justice Man and make sure he stayed in line or such. But then you go and fight Wily, Justice Man perhaps can even help at some point in Skull Castle, and you have a more positive ending. While I do think an expansion and story revision like this would do the game a lot of good, if you want to stick with the current plotline, I do think there is a way it could at least end on a more positive note. If the Rock Force and possibly even Roll were to tell Mega Man that, as fellow robots, they believe in him and that he did what needed to be done, it might make Mega Man feel better. Dr. Light telling him this, while it's a father-son sort of moment, it's still a human telling a robot he was right to fight his fellow robots. Now, all this being said, really, those are the main things I can poke at here, cutscene art and plot. Neither of these really get too much in the way of the gameplay itself, which I think Rock Force delivers pretty nicely. Pretty much all the other major issues I had with gameplay have been addressed in the various updates the game has had since my blind run. As such, really I think the game is at a phase where it mostly just needs some polish. Considering how recently the game is updated, it's obviously something that's still being worked on here and there, and looking all the stronger because of it. I'm honored to have been let in on this game so early, and I'm happy to have been able to help in beta testing and providing feedback for it. And like I said, if you do any major revisions and want me to have a look at them, please feel free to let me know. If you add any new stages, I'd be happy to blind run them. I had a great time recording this game, and I look forward to perfect running it one day. It's definitely one of the better fan efforts I've had the pleasure of playing, and it's looking better and better all the time. With that, though, I think it's about time to bring this project to a close. My thanks to all my fans and viewers, my thanks to Goldwater DLS for letting me in on this project, my apologies again for how long it took me to get this series posted, but hey, it was kind of interesting getting to show just how much it's changed from its early state. As ever, thank you all for your support and continued enjoyment of my work. I hope you enjoyed this blind run of Mega Man Rock Force, and I shall see you again in the next series. Until then, fare thee well.